And we're back here for part 3 of our interview with Jack Nounnan here at Has Beans Cafe, talking about Humboldt's role in what they call 7 Days That Shook the World, the WTO protest in Seattle. And of course, we can't forget the role of the media in that occasion and occasions here in Humboldt County, almost reflexively taking the side of state authority no matter what injustice is afoot.
Yes, of course we had our indie media. We were starting to pump some good information out, and we really had some good legal teams, and they got their information out that way. So we started something, started something. It's always been started again. We have to remind people, this is a new beginning every morning when you wake up to the sun, or whatever you find. It's never like nothing but a new beginning. So it keeps it fresh in our minds and our actions, because we look at the considerable issues that we face. It's enough to splinter one and make one feel like there's just no hope whatsoever. But if you do good work, if you do the work that you know, that's whatever your path is, whatever you see, because it's not for me to tell you what you should do or you got to do this. No, if you find, just like the kids in Coming to Earth First, once they learn and they were zapped consciously with how they could do things, be active, physically as well as mentally. When they went off like gypsies to other kinds of actions, and they found themselves in all kinds of things, maybe reporters, maybe going to Palestine. I can find them all over the world by this time. It's amazing to see what they do with their lives, but they continue to be activists, as environmentalists, as human rights, whatever.
But they were forever radicalized,
Yes.
in a sense, because they saw with the media how they treated them as. They saw as soon as President Clinton, his plane landed in Seattle, that's when the martial law started. That's when the troops rolled in. That's when the tear gas started flying.
Yeah. So much for Clinton, which surrounded his hotel too. Cut him off as much as we could. So it's really interesting to see that how if we better not take offensive postures, because we're living in a country whose intentions are always offensive, and are almost always. I have to give it a little room in there, because we have to give room to our worst of adversaries to really come around. They are part of this oneness too. It's just a matter of reaching them. Gandhi was all about that. Some of his greatest supporters were industrialists and people who really made things happen. And they said it was pretty expensive to keep him, nonviolent and in poverty. But seeing that he lived, he at least got by every day, and that's what we're doing here. It's not easy for people to think, how am I going to make it today, and what am I going to do to make my expenses? But always, if you really are working hard at it, sometimes the money will flow better. At least you'll find some answers. The latest activist I'm in touch with, Susan Radabo, is really like a symbol of that in my mind. She's going broke. She has no money. She's put aside a couple of jobs out every day, but somehow just enough money here. Her car broke down. Somebody said, hey, take this rented car and use it as long as you want. How does that happen? I don't know, but if people learn to do what they really most cherish in their mind, it's something happens. Like following your bliss, that kind of stuff. It works. It works. And when you give, it's amazing how it's a reciprocal. We get back what we give.
And we find ourselves in a very similar historical moment. 299 here, over 11 years later now. Coming up, I guess tomorrow will be the actual 11th anniversary, November 30th and 30. And here we have a neoliberal administration. We have a peace movement that's hugely demoralized. Cindy Sheehan, I'm sure you see what she has to say on the internet, complains all the time how people drink the Obama Kool-Aid and simply forget all about these wars of aggression that continue or even get worse overseas. How do you keep real hope alive when this counterfeit hope seeks to totally demobilize the peace and social justice movement?
Well, living in the present is very important. Remember remembering that to take responsibility for my acts. Just like a good shaman will say, you know, you've got to take responsibility for what you do, whether it turns out good or bad. And I already know how to look at something when I start to go the downside, as if like burned out, because we burn out over and over again. But we can remember why we did something. And even if it comes out bad, if we trace it back, if we have that kind of meditative spirit or whatever it takes in contemplation to look at what one is doing, one can see, if they trace it back, oh, that's why I made that decision. That's, and then it fits. But beside that, really seeing that if we're really good with other people, regardless of what's going on, that kind of reciprocity comes back our way too. Somehow, the spirit of how we do things emanates out, and people can feel it, and it works a little bit better. And we can't, if we want to be talked out of our own, you know, convictions, which most teachings in schools will do, maybe not Montessori, maybe some charter schools. We have some good things going now. But to just be conditioned through years and years of teaching in schools is to really think that, well, I guess it's okay to be on hold. They don't even think it that way, but why have we not allowed the kids in school who show the, you know, the chutzpah and the intelligence cannot be used to do things in their society to help mend things? Not in this society. It has not been what you wanted to do, because it's a trickle down, power first, and power owns and power controls. And when you learn all those steps, then you can help with the power and control. So it comes from an entirely different background, and it's so much better. It feels so much better than saying, oh, I'm going to go to the mall on Friday night. That is not a good outing for me.
Yeah, I can't stand that place myself. But it's interesting to see how the so-called radical left, the so-called populist right, kind of come together, whether it's homeschooling in the latter case or alternative schools like you mentioned in the former case. Either way, both sides seem to agree the mushy middle and the public education system that teaches kids more to obey than to critically think is a big part of the problem.
Yeah, it is, because that's where that hopelessness comes in, because not having a sense of, like, we got it in kindergarten. Kindergarten was a cool place to be. If we always have that concept of cooperation and, you know, take care of your, you know, and take, you know, tell your stories and do this thing and keep your relationships close, if we had that all the way through rather than turning it into something else where we give you this, we indoctrinate you, oh, we'd have a different society entirely. We would like the struggle rather than being spoiled on buying things and never getting an idea of what we could replace it with. Really thinking that it's a good time is at the mall. My good times are with my friends. My good times are with when I'm doing things that really demonstrate to my soul and my spirit that this is uplifting. This is really something that some people's spirit don't really get, except maybe at Thanksgiving or a few moments. Or the universal love comes through in all levels, so it's not that it's cut off entirely, but it comes only through in pinches here and there. We should put those pinches together in a continuity. Then we would know really what we're missing.
That reminds me of just something I was reading this morning on Truth Out on the internet. Chris Hedges, the Pulitzer Prize winning author of Empire of Illusion, he's saying, well, you know, coming up next month, myself, Cindy Sheehan, so forth, we're going to go chain ourselves to the fence of the White House and expect to spend the night in jail there in D.C. And he says, yeah, that hope for him is a conscious, deliberate, fully engaged act of resistance. That's what it means for him to be alive, not this counterfeit culture.
Yes, it's a challenge, and you learn so many things when you're in jail. You learn so much because you have such fellowship and just this thing of men and women, like when we were in the jail. It's a lousy jail in Washington. And that was beautiful for what it showed us. We were in single cells, maybe we had a cellmate, but we'd learn to talk to the next cell, and we could keep in touch all the way around this cell block just by doing this. And when we got out of the cell, that we all went together and festered together and talked about what we were going to do. and the guards were like nonplussed. And when they tried to break us off and have night jail and get us out early, one at a time, we did a protest by all taking off our clothes in our cells and going on a fast. And next thing, they didn't know how to handle that, walking into the cells, finding us with no clothes on. And when we heard that somebody else over on the other side was being mistreated or something, we would all scream and get into our yells and sing. We had a good time. And we stopped them taking us out one at a time. And even the mayor came in. The mayor of Washington came in and said, I would like to meet you people. The guards came in and said, you know, you kind of remind us of civil rights days. They were black guards. And they were proud of what we were doing, even though they could turn around and you know, give somebody help down the line. Interesting way we have, which is essentially, you know, this two-sided vision we have. And they are really two-forked, and we have to really look at what we do, because what one hand is doing should know what the other hand is doing. And do they really, are they in unity? Like, I'm doing a good deed over here, I'm doing dirt over here. It doesn't work.
So you mentioned Susan's great work regarding the serious environmental concerns, not just to the fish and the dolphins and the marine mammals, but to people who enjoy surfing on this coastline. They stood up against the pulp mill in the early 90s when they were dumping toxic chemicals right on our coast that was giving the surfers skin rashes and toxic effects. Doesn't seem like the same level of commitment is here locally regarding the U.S. Navy. They want to dump thousands of pounds of heavy metals, depleted uranium shells firing off our coast. It seems like an extremely serious matter, and more people would take seriously.
Yes, it is. It's huge. It's huge. So we're getting the word out as much as we can. We have, you know, huge email serve list, and we're asking other people to do the same. We know that it's difficult to get out to rallies, but even if there are 50 or less people there, we still know that we've done a good job on a cold day, and we remember that will build. If people could remember that rallying is really a good thing, and also right now is an accumulation of different of the situation we face coming out of these elections. I think we're thinking a little different about coalitions. A lot of people thinking, again, this collective consciousness, how do we make this work better? Some people thinking about how do we gather and make priorities? How do we work together with all these splintered issues? How do we come under the same umbrella? That's a tough one, but I think we have to do that, and we have to face losing elections possibly by voting green rather than lesser of two evils, really getting in there and saying, well, why lose another 2 years or 4 years with people who are just going to snub us anyway? They're not going to do what we expect them to do anyway, which takes me back to Obama. Obama needed to hear from all of his supporters how much they didn't like what he was doing, or that he should do this or that. The thing about Americans, they become, in so many cases, except for the, you know, some progressives and of course the Tea Party, is nobody wants to talk up. Oh, I don't want to, you know, appear as if I'm against Obama. Hey, every you know, like president who's ever done anything really constructive has had a lot of people on his butt and telling him what they wanted, and that was his constituency, which got him into office too, which is now saying, you got to do this in order to keep my support. So, but they lost. They all went home. They got discouraged. We have an election of a bunch of people who are really speaking out, but all of those young people, 19 to 29 to 30 or whatever, are sat home and said, and again, through their disillusionment, oh, it's not happening, I can't do anything. I don't think we'll ever do anything unless we learn what the Czechs and the Romanians and when the East Berlins did, standing up together and doing. This is what we have to relearn.
And rekindling the flame of resistance, we'll get to in our final part here with Jack Nounnan at Has Beans Cafe.